I was hired because the cemetery had a period of time where they experienced some people sneaking in to perform rituals. I was 21 years old, doing this as a side job, with nothing to protect myself. I was given a barcode scanner and was told to drive through the entire cemetery every hour or so to patrol, and to scan each of the pre-posted barcodes to prove. I was actually doing it. Now, the cemetery was massive, pretty much broken into 3 parts. The new part, the historic part, and the famous part where celebrities are buried. I did this routine once and never did it again, going so far as to break the barcode scanner, so I didn't have to do it. While I was driving, it was pitch black, coming around a long, curved road. My headlights, what I couldn't discern, were a pair of legs walking across the path, but only up to the knees. Shoes, pants, knees, then absolutely nothing. I stopped in the road and just watched this pair of legs cross 10 feet in front of me. I put the car in reverse, did what felt like the longest K-turn of my life, and noped it straight back to the parking lot. I can't forget it. It's with me nowadays. I worked the 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. shift. The cemetery closed at 6 p.m. So around 5:30 p.m., I would lock the main gate. Then would start driving through the cemetery to notify any visitors that we'd be closing soon. So one day, I'm in the middle of my final drive-through and see an old lady slowly walking the sidewalk alongside a mausoleum. The mausoleum was hundreds of feet long, about 20 feet tall, and had no breaks in it. It was one long stretch. The road ran directly alongside the sidewalk of the mausoleum. So I pull up behind the lady to tell her we're closing. Get out of my car. Take my eyes off of her for a split second as I'm getting out of the car. And when I shut the door and look up, she's gone. Completely vanished. I didn't think anything paranormal at first. I just thought maybe I lost sight of her. But the sidewalk and the road were completely empty. I ran all the way around to check the back of the mausoleum, but no one was there. Across from the mausoleum was a whole field of graves, and I eagle-eyed every row. Not a soul inside. I finished up my roundup and sit in my car the rest of the night. I saw a fully visible person. I know it. No tricks of light. No hallucination. Plain as day. I don't know who she was. Where is she right now? One day, my friend and I were walking the paved roads in there with a trash bag, looking for leather. We came upon a particular area of the cemetery that has a lot of mausoleums and took the next lane around the corner that goes along the side of one mausoleum. As we rounded it, there was an older gentleman, maybe in his 80s, standing with his back against the side of mausoleum, just looking at the plot of graves nearby. 2 things were kinda weird about him. He was dressed a bit odd. His clothes were a little out of date. Jacket in 80-degree weather, and one of those newsboy type caps, long pants, button-up shirt. But when you think about it, a lot of elderly people kinda dress in out-of-date clothing anyway. So I shrugged it off. The second thing, he had a coffee mug he was drinking out of. Ceramic coffee mug that he was sipping out of, right in the middle of the cemetery. Waved at each other and kept walking. We were only a few feet away when the other girl said, "That was a little weird." We both looked over our shoulders back at him, but he was gone. We stopped and kinda took a few steps back to see if he'd walk around the mausoleum, but we couldn't see him anymore. A couple days later, we both showed up for work and found one of the regular workers to let him know we were there. We talked to him a few minutes, and he brought up seeing the old man by the mausoleum in the east section. The groundskeeper smiled and said, "Did he have a coffee mug?" We said, Yeah? He said, "That's our ghost. He's not really there." He said he's always seen in that spot, looking at the family plot, and always has a coffee mug. He said there's a grave for wife, 2 daughters, and the husband, and the 3 of them have the exact same date their lives ended. They think he was a dad and that he maybe used to visit his wife and children's graves a lot. He told us people only see him for a few seconds. Then he's gone. He's a ghost, not a man. The cremation chamber has an exhaust. Sleeping one night when my wife shook me awake, I got up and went to the window and saw that from the exhaust there was thick smoke pluming out, as if someone was being cremated. Seeing as we were the ones who operate the crematorium, and neither of us was there, I had my wife call the police while I went over to check on things. A fire of over 1,000 degrees was likely burning inside. One way or another, it had been turned off as quickly as possible, or at the very least controlled. All the lights were off and the doors were locked, as they were every night. I went inside, and the inside of the retort was bright with flames, but there was nothing inside it. We cleaned the cremation chamber after its use, and while the flames alone would likely produce some kind of smoke, the smoke that we saw coming from the exhaust was kind of thick, gray and black smoke that could only be produced by something actual physical burning. There's a ladder that leads to a ceiling exit, but the tube was locked from the inside. The police showed up and looked at the report, but there was nothing to be done. It was attributed to someone having left the report on before leaving, even though my wife and I both knew the other hadn't done that. That's one that I'll forever ponder. I can't forget it. My family has owned a cemetery for about 5 generations. The house that my family built on the property is about 30 yards back from the main office. One night, when they were kids, my grandpa and uncle were up late. My uncle happened to look out our window and swore to my grandpa that he'd seen someone walk behind one of the trees. The lamppost illuminated the very first handful of plots and headstones on the other side of the road. But at that point, they weren't disturbed. My grandpa and uncle stood at their window for a little while, with my grandpa teasing my uncle for being scared. However, when they woke up the next morning, the police were there. In the hours between they looked out the window and saw the burial plots undisturbed, about 4 a.m., and the time they noticed the commotion, about 5 a.m., 7 of the plots had been dug up. The headstones were stacked very deliberately, like a house of cards, but behind them, the caskets were atop one another. The first one laying flat, the next one straight up, then flat, straight up, flat, straight up, with the final one flat, with basic casket dimensions taken into account. That's nearly 30 feet high. I'm sure you can imagine, even with machinery in the present day, that would take at least a little bit of time to accomplish. But nope, back in the 1950s, this was somehow done in a span of less than 180 minutes, with no one that lived in the house able to hear it going on. I've had a number of odd experiences with our crematorium. One such instance was in 2012, following a service for a very large man, roughly 375 pounds. I got the retort, cremation chamber, preheated while my wife set up a movie to watch while the man was cremated. I used the elevating platform and then slid him in, closing the door to the retort afterwards, and went to sit down. About 5 minutes after I'd shut the door to the retort, we heard a thump. Neither of us paid it much mind, but a few moments later, there was another, and then another. I stood up, worried that the man may have had a pacemaker still inside him. However unlikely, as he'd had his organs removed. The thumping and thudding got more hurried. We looked through the front window of the retort and couldn't believe what we were seeing. The man inside was flailing about. Both of his arms and legs were bouncing around, like he was in extreme pain. Now, it isn't odd to see parts move while someone is being cremated. As the limbs are broken down, they'll often contract as muscles and tendons snap. But this was most decidedly not that. The man's fingers were balled up in fists and were banging against the windows, and his legs seemed to be kicking downward, as if to get out. The man's mouth opened and first groans began emanating from within, then screams. There was no way, absolutely no way whatsoever that he could still have been alive. But for about 20 seconds after we'd gone up to the retort, the man inside the cremation chamber screamed and flayed his arms and legs about.